All right, thanks for coming. And we're privileged to have this time to talk about the lecture. And Stephen's here.
Yeah, Stephen's,
Are you close by or?
yes, he's a 1 minute walk.
That's not true. I'm actually 4 minutes away. That's
4 minutes?
Come on over.
Hmm.
He's here, that's all that matters.
Well, you're,
I would be there, Tracy, except I do have another webinar right after this, so I need my computer.
Okay.
So I'm sorry to disappoint you. Next time, hopefully you'll still be in New York.
We will. We're here till January.
well, thanks, everybody. It's great to see everyone tonight.
Okay.
And here in the house, we have Joel, Teresa, and Juan.
Right.
And Tracy and
Teresa, the other Teresa said she's coming. I suspect she's on her way.
well, look, this is a kind of a big topic, the energy centers. And I will say that soon after I put out our email telling people to be here tonight for this subject, I got an email from Moira Shaw. And Moira sent me her analysis of the lectures, the guide lectures, which talk about the energy centers. And there are 6 of those lectures: 154, 170, 172, 173, 208, and 197. So Moira wrote me this very interesting and very thoughtful analysis of these energy centers in the Pathwork lectures. And she really clarifies things and strips away a lot of, well, I wouldn't say confusion, but she says things that really throw a lot of light on the subject. And I'm going to send you guys a copy of the file, okay? So I'm gonna put that in the chat now.
You mean the number of the lectures or what?
I'm talking about what Moira sent me, her 4 or 5 page description of the energy centers.
Oh, and who put them together?
Moira Shaw.
Oh, I see. She put them together. So
Yeah.
you have them, so you can send it out on the on email.
Well, I'm going to send it to you guys because you are the creme de la creme, the cognoscenti,
Okay.
who actually show up,
Okay.
and you guys get the premium product.
Wonderful.
I guess, did you guys get it in the chat? Did you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Alan, can you put in the lecture numbers in the chat again, please?
Sure. Well, they're in Moira's document, but I can also, I'll put the lectures to talk about the energy centers right now. Okay.
Oh. But
Okay, I'll just put them in. And I also sent everybody documents. I sent people 2 lectures that John Parakos delivered in the 70s. They're long documents, and he talks about the energy centers. I think these are transcripts of talks that he gave at the Pathwork Center, or at his own institute, the Core Energetic Institute. And I'll read a little bit from these just by way of introducing the subject. Monuments and ancient writings all indicate that the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Greeks, the Chinese, the Buddhists, the Hindus, all were aware of and studied the energy centers of man. The crown on thousands of images of Buddha's head represents the chakras beyond the body, which connect him with the divine. There is evidence that the energy centers were known and used for various work done by the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians. These societies kept this information secret, probably because it was considered dangerous for the masses to have access to this knowledge, knowing the power that man possesses once the peripheral struggle is eliminated. In the hidden, and dogs agree, in hidden life of Freemasonry. Short pause here. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Teresa. Sorry, okay.
In the hidden life of Freemasonry, C.W. Ledbetter refers to a particular Masonic use of these centers, quote, "It is part of the plan of Freemasonry to stimulate the activity of these forces in the human body in order that evolution may be quickened. The energy centers, or chakras, as they are called in Hindi, are mentioned in the minor Upanishads in tantric works. It's quite clear that whatever record man has left of his being here on earth, whether stone monuments, hieroglyphics, or Sanskrit literature, there's plentiful evidence that he has always sought to understand and to use his own energy centers in an attempt to reach a clearer and higher level of life. From another lecture that he gave, I think in the same year, he says, the subject of the energy centers of man has been dealt with in mystic literature and other allied approaches, but it has never been presented as an existing reality of the makeup of the entity of man. Today, when Western science accepts the concepts of interchangeability of energy and matter, it is about time that we examine these concepts from all aspects, because this is of great significance in understanding the function of man on all levels, the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. Man's body is a marvel of creation. It is the instrument where all the tunes of life are played. It is made up of zillions of cells which are organized into fossicles, tissues, organs, and systems. However, each cell maintains its own consciousness and its state of being. Each cell is immersed in experiences of millennia, immersed in the river of life that created the evolutionary aspect of the development of man. In the daily life of the cells, energy and matter are interchangeable. Energy is converted into matter, and matter streams out into energy states. It is important to clarify here that man's body is not as rigid, delineated, and solid as perceived by us, but is interpenetrated by the corresponding energy states of the body, which occupy the same space as the physical body. In other words, man has many bodies, and the physical body is the crystallization of his energy into solid matter, while at the same time, other energies of the body exist in a freer state, which interpenetrate, surround, and extend beyond the physical limits of the solid body. This is not an unusual concept. You should keep in mind, for instance, that as electricity flows through a copper wire, it creates at the same time an energy field, which is defined according to the laws of physics developed by Maxwell, i.e., this energy field is an inherent state of the flow of electricity through the wire. As long as the electricity flows, the energy field around the periphery of the wire exists, but when it stops, the energy field collapses. The energy body, or aura, has been given many names through the ages. It's been called spira by the Greeks, mumia by Paracelsus, animal magnetism by Mesmer, Od by von Reichenbach, human atmosphere by Kilner, orgone by Reich, and in the newer scientific explorations of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, it has been called the electrodynamic field of life by Burr and Northrop. So that's some of the background that John Parakas gave about the energy centers and the fact that this concept is rooted in many civilizations and rooted in history and referred to by many great thinkers and writers. All right, so here we are in 2023. Now, as Moira points out in the document I sent, there are 6 lectures that talk about the energy fields. I remember, John Parakas visualizing the aura and seeing it, where he would put people against a neutral background like a white wall, and he'd wear his quartz glasses. And he said he could see the kind of undulating aura around people. But I don't remember him ever talking about seeing the actual energy centers. Although in the documents that I got from his daughter, Magdalene Parakas, there are drawings of these energy centers, which are like vortices. They're like shaped like flowers, like flower petals. And apparently they move in clockwise direction. And they're like, whirling vortexes. And I suppose that whether they are, how strongly they rotate or how large they are, or the direction of the rotation says certain things about the state of being of the energy of the people that are being observed. So I know these things are, I guess, more or less familiar to us, right? But the guide in this lecture talks about the energy centers, and this particular lecture, I guess I'll just go over it briefly and then we can talk about it. I mean, I was kind of wondering, like, obviously it's very difficult to see these energy centers, and I suppose you have to be very sensitive to perceive them. And the strength of these energy centers or their shape have to do with whether they're open or closed or blocked or not. And a lot of the lecture has to do with blocked energy centers or energy centers where they're not, there's something that's blocking the flow of the energy, right? And the central theme of the lecture is there are things that we can do to unblock these energy centers. Does anybody want a copy of the lecture?
It's okay.
Copies?
Does anyone want to what?
Oh, I just asked if you have a
Have
copy.
extra copies?
I got extra copies here.
Yes, thank you, and just keep it as a backup.
All right, so let's talk about the 4 sections of this lecture. In the first section, the guide obviously talks about the fact that growth is based on raising consciousness, right? Raising it beyond or through the level of duality. He says, and specifically about the energy centers, he says, the life force is the creative force that enlivens the whole universe. It contains all life elements, all potentials, every possibility for life expression. This is such a powerful force that it must be adapted so as not to explode an organism whose consciousness is not yet sufficiently strong to accept the total power. Each living organism, therefore, possesses special centers that convert, assimilate, and balance the power that streams into it. So these energy centers, their purpose is to harness spiritual power and assimilate, somehow connects the spiritual power to the physical body. Now, I've never heard of anyone exploding, but maybe that's just
Because we have our energy centers.
Because we have them in regulation, the amounts that comes in.
But our guru once said, when somebody asked about enlightenment, he said that the human mind has to be prepared and human body, because otherwise it would just explode, just like if you took 40 volts bulb and put 1,000,000 volts in there.
Yeah, this concept of being able to take in the power. And of course, the guide does say,
To assimilate it, he was there.
Of course.
yeah, the guide does talk about the fact that the energies of the new age, the energies of this period, this time, are something that either create a crisis or an opening. And that the crisis, if you resist and if you can't handle the energies that are coming in, you're going to have a personal crisis if you're not able to somehow join these energies and meld with these energies. So as he says, last paragraph on page 1, as I said, the life force streaming into the organism must be metabolized, distributed, and adjusted. Otherwise, the force would be too strong. If the human consciousness is divided and in conflict, if on the one hand it is ready to metabolize more varied power, yet on the other hand it is imbalanced and disturbed, the centers close up. They become clogged. The process of self-realization thus also means opening up the centers. So every center has this kind of different vibration and a different focus. And there are 6 centers that the guide talks about. Now, in the chakras, when you look up chakras on the internet, it says there are 7. But you know, who's counting?
6, 7.
But I think that they kind of, what the guide talks about the energy centers, I think that it kind of maybe combines a couple of the chakras, but the whole thrust and focus, the whole thrust is the same. So whether we're talking about 6 or 7, I'm really not sure, but I'm a novice in this area anyway.
And there
Well,
is
I just want to say, in Eastern traditions, they talk about like many, I don't know the numbers they talk about. Like I think in Vedic wisdom is like, there's actually, I don't know, many chakras.
But the guy,
And there's so many systems, you know, there's like so many systems out there.
the guy actually
go ahead.
specifically, he talks about here. He explains that, you know, that some people say that there is more than 6 because there's actually a projection from chakra to the front. For example, the sexual chakra, he says, projects also here. So some people mistake the projection
Yeah.
with the with the actual chakra.
No, you know, the chakras are like, Alan was saying, like energy centers like flowers. So like when you have the second chakra, which he describes, is not only up front, it like circulates within the body. It's like a flower that when it's open, I assume it goes like around, this whole area. So it's like the only thing that is different, yes, there is 7. And what this lady is saying, I also heard
It says
from
6.
Deborah King from Vedic tradition that the ones in our body is actually 7, but there is many, many more going up.
Okay, anyway, and
Outside
what I
of the
think
body.
is, can I ask people to come over here if they want to talk and address everyone? It's better because otherwise I'm gonna have to be carrying the computer all over the place.
You can just
Can I? I'll try. Now what I think what Moira says is really interesting. She says that the first 3 centers are about developing a healthy ego, and the second 3 are about connecting with the spiritual.
There's a split between the.
from the heart. the
So,
heart, and this one.
The first center, she said in this document that I sent you guys, personality development. First center, the sexual center. This center represents all the physical and emotional feelings of sexuality, partnership love, and personal love, located at the base of the spine. The first center goes beyond limited genital pleasure. It comprises the whole extending of personal love to a beloved other human being. It involves the individual's capacity to experience pleasure on all levels, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. It involves giving and receiving independently and giving into involuntary processes. There is no need for ego control. Opening this center enables the entity to tap the ever-present, ever-ongoing process of creation in order to experience pleasure supreme / ecstasy in personal relationship. So then, and Moira's kind of summarizing the lecture. She says, reasons for closure of this center, what the guide says, dualistic concept of morality versus pleasure produces negative feelings. The ego wants to be good and fears to expose negative feelings. So, as we always are talking about in the Pathwork, the refusal to accept and expose negative feelings is a fundamental obstacle of our growth. And that is what closes this particular center, that duality.
Not experiencing negative feelings.
Not being willing to experience it, right. The second center, the solar plexus center. The solar plexus, I'm going to give you guys copies of this.
Alan, could you slow down a tiny bit?
Sure. I'm sorry. All right. Second center, the solar plexus center. The solar plexus center opens the way to connection and unification with spiritual wisdom and universal truths. Personal love feelings connected to this experience. Opening to this center must bring you to the seat of all your feelings, which usually precedes contact with the divine, at least to some degree. I'm just going to read these 6 centers, then we're going to go over it again. Third center is the will center. Now that's in the back between the shoulder blades.
That's the new one. Nobody has any.
Right.
That's the different one.
This center regulates the mental and emotional attitudes regarding strength, selfhood, autonomy, and self-responsibility, and everything that goes along with these attitudes. Dignity, healthy pride of the individual, backbone, self-assertion. I mean, I remember this very clearly in these bioenergetic groups with John Parakas, talks about people being able to stand up, and if they have backbone, if they could somehow stand up for their own truth and be independent, be strong. And the reasons for closure, the conflict between selfishness versus altruism. Those are the three centers that have to do with the development of personality. Then the next three centers, the other three, have to do with the spiritual. And they are the fourth center, the throat center. This center is concerned with attitudes regarding the assimilation of mental and spiritual material. This center is concerned with an individual's ability to accept, to adjust, and to adapt himself or herself in a flexible way. So, and he says that she says that acceptance is in direct opposition to self-assertion and backbone. This is why they're located parallel to one another, the one in front, the other in the back. There must be a proper balance between the two. Now that's very interesting, right? Then the fifth center is the third eye center. This fifth center between the eyes deals with spiritual vision, not physical vision, but spiritual vision. Vision of life, vision of oneself, vision of truth. This center is a preliminary manifestation to total spiritual wholeness, total realization of the divine self. And then the sixth center, the top of the head center, the crown chakra, as they call it, the sixth center at the top of the head is activated by the total integration of the personality with all other centers functioning in harmony. It is the center that is directly connected with the spiritual self.
So I figured it out. She's missing the heart chakra. That would be the center.
Right.
Everything else comes out because there is there is the 1, 2, 3. The third one is in the back, but the fourth is the heart chakra.
Right, that's right.
And then the fifth
Teresa
is
points out that the traditional heart chakra of the 7 chakras is missing in the guide's schematic of
So
these
somehow
centers.
he distributes it differently.
So maybe it's distributed differently, right?
Can I just say in Kabbalah, the Kabbalah puts together the heart and the solar plexus. So there's no separate, the solar plexus, and then, well, they actually don't consider the throat a center, but then I think it goes up to, I'm not like, anyway, that part that I know is true.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I always felt that the solar plexus is the seat of the feelings. And I mean, the heart, okay, it's pumping away, but I mean, I can see that. I think that makes sense personally to me anyway.
They're aligned.
In the lecture, just to get back to the lecture for a minute, the 4 parts of it, the lecture talks about how the physical body is just a reflection of the spiritual body. And then second section, the guide talks about what determines the smooth functioning of the energy centers. It depends entirely on the state of consciousness. So here we are, raising consciousness. That's basically the whole thing with the pathwork. That's what we have to do. And to the degree that we can raise our consciousness, we're enabling the smooth functioning of these energy centers. So each mistaken idea creates destructive feelings and limited concepts of self and life. So if we're able to clear up our mistaken ideas, our misconceptions, we're able to open to free-flowing energy in all of these centers. The proper functioning of the life centers is impossible when the human being is still involved in the dualistic conflict. Perhaps the most basic dualism is the question of morality versus pleasure, selfishness versus altruism, self-deprivation versus depriving others. The whole concept of good and evil stems from this arbitrary, unnecessary, and mistaken concept of life. All human civilization, almost all philosophies are poisoned by this basic split in human consciousness. My friends, as long as you believe that you have to choose between being good or obtaining your advantage, you must be in terrible conflict. So, as I said, we have to strive to understand our limitations. Duality creates a chain reaction of negative emotions, limited concept, conflict between self and others, hence limitation of experience. A state of consciousness sets in that subtly but definitely prohibits your expansion. As you become more aware of yourself in the course of self-confrontation, You also begin to detect those subtle little reactions that indicate how you prevent yourself from expansion and delightful experience. You detect your fear of using your potential to the utmost. Third section, the guy talks about the 6 chakras, the 6 energy centers. And this is what Moira talked about, what she summarized. The first is the sexual center, base of the spine. Second is solar plexus. The third is the back. Its faculty of will is will. Now, he says, so far, we can see we have dealt with 3 basic human functions: feeling, knowing, willing. If harmony exists between those 3 functions, there is perfect interplay and no weighting of one at the expense of the other. Yeah, feeling, the sexual center, knowing, the solar plexus, yeah, and willing. Yeah, so I guess in the sexual center, he incorporates all feelings. And of course, what Moira said about like the kind of not just sexual, but the ability to connect with your partner, in a deep way, that's certainly the greatest dimension of feeling, I think. All right. Then the guide says that he examines how a weak ego influences the functions of the 2 aforementioned centers. He says, if you're weak and dependent, you must be fearful. Hence, you must lack the courage for the great experience of living, for the deeper wisdom that transcends the ego. The weak ego makes you hold on so tightly that you cannot open up for what lies beyond its scope. To trust, love, and be happy, to let involuntary processes do their part in the business of living, requires strength. Perception of the greatest reality is hindered when the ego is not flexible and strong. It has to be independent without believing it is the only function to count on. Then the guy talks about the other 3 centers, which are connection to the spiritual, the center in the throat, function to take in, ingest, and digest, assimilate, and accept. 5th center between the eyes, the capacity to visualize, to see, to comprehend. And the final center, which is the connection to the divine reality. Then the guy talks some more about duality and the reasons that we can't access these centers or allow them to open and be, connected to what is. Again, he kind of recaps over the fact that we have to overcome our unconscious fears. And this can only be done when you accept and understand instead of resisting. We don't have to accept deprivation, unfulfillment, and sacrifice. Religion has taught this for centuries because it misunderstood the meaning of acceptance. It is true you must accept, but when you say, I must have this and not experience the other, you're in a state of tight, anxious defense. You're in an insurmountable struggle. How can you learn to give up the attitude, I must, without giving up on your happiness? Religion's postulate that the good person must sacrifice is an error. The original meaning has 2 facets. The first is that selfishness must sometimes be overcome if what is at stake for the other is more important than what the self can gain. The second concerns the attitude of letting go, which every genuine spiritual visionary has tried to convey to humankind. Only in the mind's duality does letting go imply, I must relinquish what I want. Beyond duality, that is not so. So, of course, that's a huge lesson that we always learn in Pathwork, which is, I can give up what I want, and I can still have it, right? I mean, maybe I'll have it in a different way. But the ego and tight insistence that I have to have this thing that I want in this particular way. It just isn't the case. It just isn't true. If you learn to let go trustingly, you transcend duality. You come out of the struggle between fear and deprivation on the one hand, and tight holding on and guilt and anxiety on the other. If you can let go in the trusting spirit that says, if I cannot have it this way, perhaps there is another way. If not now, later. You will lose your fear, tightness of centers, and sense of loss. Then the life forces will bubble and surge through your entire system, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. They will work in full harmony, functioning the way life is destined, which is utter bliss and forever greater expansion. Then the energy centers will function in harmony and will dispose of the waste energy that is now held within your system. There can be no more toxic psychic poisoning than undisposed waste material of energy that should leave the system. You know this principle holds true about everything else: food, water, air. It also applies to the metabolism of energy and mind material. All that functions as it should must be continually renewed, disposing of waste material and gathering new material. Then he says, the Pathwork promise, which is usually in the beginning of the lecture, but here it's on page 7. Study these words, make use of them, make them your own. Let it be an incentive that life can be so very different from what it is. What you experience now at its best is only a small token of what still lies in store for you. The difficulties you experience are a kind of a disease, as it were, and unnecessary, something that can certainly be eliminated if you learn to understand its meaning. And this, of course, is the most important thing. And then the guide, of course, recaps another very fundamental principle of Pathwork. He says, the majority of human beings experience their difficulties in life as if they came to them by accident. Saying, this is life, prevents the consciousness from seeing the difficulty as a vital expression of the self, no matter how much it seems to be inflicted upon the self from outside. It is never so. And to the degree you can understand your life experience as an expression of that part of yourself you are not yet familiar with, you will truly overcome the obstruction to your happiness. So that's not blaming the victim, ladies and gentlemen. That is simply coming to terms with our lives as a reflection of who we are. That's what the Pathwork says. So I'd like to find out how people perceive their energy centers and how one is able to determine whether they're open or closed. Does anyone have any thoughts or insights about that? Teresa.
After a yoga class, I heard that all of the energy centers are aligned.
Oh, you don't have to see
Yeah.
that and that. So after a good yoga class, like I went for a yin class yesterday, and it's a beautiful, very highly spiritual teacher. And it's a very meditative practice, but it's also aligns all of your chakras, the actual physical chakras. And literally, I feel amazing after a yoga class. So I've heard from few people in the field that the yoga actually, because it comes from the Vedas, just like the other esoteric knowledge about chakras and other stuff, that yoga practice will align all of the chakras. So when I am anxious or worried, which I just found out because I signed up for an Ayurveda teachings and courses, I'm a Vata. So if out of balance Vata is fear and worry and all of those things. So I have a lot of that in me because I am actually Vata and not always balanced. Yoga does it for me. I go for a good yoga class, I come out serene, and I literally feel like everything is well and all is, and there is an expansion even in the physical field, in the way I perceive, in the way I sometimes I find like I'm flying out of the yoga institute. I'm not really walking, like I'm flying.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so cool. I like you sharing where that class is, because I mean
Actually where I go right now is not as usually as good as what I went in a city.
okay.
I used to go to Dharma Yoga right on 24th Street. It's very good. But a good yoga class, but you have to find something that really resonates with you, really aligns all of the chakras. And it's only temporary. They don't align fully like with what we do here because there is other obstacles. But for the moment, when you do a good yoga class, they do. And then the proof is also this. I went for a 8-day yoga retreat in Spain where they had the Iyengar wall, which means you really align because you hang upside down. We work with partners. They stretch the spine each and every way. It was very challenging. Twice a day for 8 days, we did yoga. I came home, I never felt better in my life. I literally had such a feeling of well-being, absolute no fear, no worry, that I was amazed. I'm going again in November just to re-experience it because I literally came back and for about a week, I was completely happy with everything and nothing bothered me, which is very strange for me being Vata and out of balance. So to me, one way to experience this is just go to a good yoga class and that will align
Thank
the
you,
chakras.
Teresa. Other thoughts, Tracy? Is there a reason why
Let me go
you
last.
picked this all up? Okay. Would anyone else like to comment about how they perceive their own energy centers?
Sure, you've been studying this.
You're being put on the spot.
He's been studying and studying.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, guys. Everybody. The one thing that struck me is that it seemed like the guide was relating the defense mechanisms with the chakras, right? So like when they talk about will and emotion and fear. And just for me personally, I know I'm a will type, and I have this spot in my back that comes and goes, this pain in my back that comes and goes.
Where is it?
It's like right behind my heart.
Behind it, between the shoulder blades?
It's actually lower than that, but
That's not your lower back.
no, I mean, I've had lower back issues, but nothing lately.
Yeah.
But this has been a long-standing pain behind my heart, and I somehow think the connection maybe to will. I don't know. I mean, I'll read Moira's thing here and see if anything else. But that just struck me as kind of interesting because I know that that's something I struggle with, So, and the idea, of letting go and how we don't really understand that. And I always feel like I'm struggling with that, letting go. So anyway, the other chakras, I don't really, I mean, I'm familiar with them and what they are. And I do sometimes have different sense. And, the other thing that, when they talk about the three, are ego building, and then the other three are spiritual. And, I do feel like doing this work. In the beginning, I was more focused on the, like removing blocks that seem to be like ego development, standing up for myself, that kind of. And then when I had that experience that I talked, the green girl thing, I really feel like I crossed into, like, if you think of the heart chakra as being the middle, right, with the three lower ones and then the three upper, I feel like the heart is, I crossed through the heart into the higher, more spiritual development. And I know it's not linear, it's not like you start at the bottom and you work your way up, but I did have this sense that, I had gone deeper and I had gotten crossed over past ego development and went into more spiritual development through that experience and all the work that I did then at that time. So.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment here or how
I'll
they
share a little bit.
Juan, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Beautiful people out there. What can I say? I mean, this is a very beautiful lecture, Alan, Tracy. Thank you for selecting them. They all are, right? But this lecture in this chakras is very beautiful. I think beautiful subject. Because I think it encompasses most of the teachings of the guide, because well, let me go to me because I'm supposed to share my experience. But the way I have come to understand and actually feel the result of the centers opening up is, I think the guy mentions that as you grow spiritually, generally meaning as you keep working on yourself and you slowly purify your soul, overcome the ego, the hurdles and obstacles, you start to feel a general sense of the opening of centers. And with me personally, I don't know, I feel blessed because somehow I am able to connect with this material, pathwork material, and go deep into it and really come to understand and kind of experience what he talks about here. And as I progress, in my inner work, by questioning myself, self-observation, and really experiencing, what comes up, because it's all about that. It's all about experiencing that pain and those discomfort and those emotions that you don't really feel comfortable or aligned with. So as you sit with that and you work with it and you experience it, and you just, rather than shrinking or escaping or running away from it, you encounter it face to face directly and go through the pain. And as the guy said, the only way out is in and through. So when you go through those feelings, I personally feel that I just feel blessed, and every day, and I experience it always when I go into meditation, 15 minutes even, or when I walk through the forest. It's there's this joy, this bliss, this happiness, this alignment, this like perfect order with everything in life. You start to feel that and to see that in your everyday living, even in your most, insignificant details of life. You start to see that beautiful order, how things beautifully aligns, so that's my experience, basically saying that as you progress spiritually, and you really slowly, surely start to eliminate those ego influences, because to me, that's what it's all about in the end, just all about really, controlling or taming that ego, and so that it reaches that point of surrender when it can actually submit to that inner being, to the highest self, to the Holy Spirit, as it is called in the Bible. And at the end of the day, to me, it boils down to that, to love and surrender, just practicing love the best way you know how, and also and surrendering the best way you can to that inner spirit, to its inner guidance, and just allow to drive you, to lead through you, to speak through you, to feel through you. And as you conquer the ego, this becomes possible slowly but surely, in my experience.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was beautifully said.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you for that.
Yeah, one has the feel. I just had the thought maybe when all the centers are open and rotating, moving, maybe that's when we feel bliss, the elusive bliss that the guy keeps talking about, that's like, where's that confounded bliss? But maybe there's a ground of bliss. I think the idea is that no matter what happens, there's still a ground of bliss that exists, and if our energy centers are open, we can feel it. Not that we don't get entangled in duality, but yeah.
Can I share something?
Of course you can. Go ahead, Barbara.
Excuse me. I'm not sure. I guess what I wanted to share was that from the lecture, I got a much deeper feeling and understanding of the self in regards to sort of like the greater good. I think I had shared once before how I always had such a tough time with the O. Henry story, the gift of the Magi, where the woman sacrifices, cuts off her hair, to give a gift of the watch fob. You know the story.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So that just the giving over and the trust and the understanding within the lecture of, like having, like your own healthy needs, but also seeing the greater good, seeing the needs of others, and being able to, I guess, give over or step back. And I just felt that it was like, I don't know if I'm expressing it, but just the words in the lecture helped me to really feel this on a very deep level. And I don't know, I relate it to the last months when Bill was alive and I was with him every day. And that was my life. And it was I wanted to be there with him and give over to just sharing those last, the last times with him. And I guess that, the rest of my life didn't matter at that moment, pretty much. And it felt very real and just, sort of like a knowing and a grounding. And I relate to understanding of like sort of like giving over to the greater good, or letting go of ego. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yeah, Joel, would you like to say something?
So I just keep thinking, what's the purpose of this lecture related in the context of the Pathwork overall, right? So I think of this as kind of a roadmap, if you will, of pointing us in the direction, giving us knowledge about the kinds of emotional and everyday challenges that we might be facing that come up as we're paying attention to our experience and our feelings, right? That's the essence of what I understand us to be doing with the Pathwork. And so what this is doing is it's saying, all right, if I'm in a conflict with somebody about getting my way, so this is will, right? It might be ego. So which one of these energy centers is speaking to that? And what are some of the characteristics of that center, so that I get a better idea around the issue that I'm dealing with, kind of the philosophy, if you will, or the rationale behind that particular challenge that I'm experiencing in an individualized way. If that makes sense. Because I don't know that we open an energy center because we decide, oh, I'm blocked in this energy center, I need to open the center up. Now, there are ways to do that with the help of people who know, body work, or they do chakra opening chakras. Although, as Teresa mentioned, in the yoga that she feels open, but then, of course, for all of us might get open, but then we go back to our normal ways because we still have these blockages, which isn't to say it's not a good idea to try to have that different experience of ourself when the chakras open, because then that becomes reinforcing and motivating. So that's about all I have to say. The other thing that struck me about the lecture at the beginning, and Alan was talking about this, the joy, and so the guide is reminding us again that we are a part of the universal, we're the universal expressed as us, individualized, and as such, you know, all of the depth of joy and, you know, unity, oneness, peace is in us all the time. It's that these blockages that we have separated give it the appearance of our being separated, when in fact it's always there. And so I think that's very, you know, reinforcing or encouraging to remember that, you know, joy is available in any moment, like as Juan was saying. Just he connects by walking through the woods, and then that experience brings him into contact with his unified self. And so I thought that was very encouraging, that the guide kind of built the guide around the energy centers from that foundation.
Thank you, Joel. All right, anyone want to speak from cyberspace? Their perceptions of the energy centers, if they have any? Stephen.
Well, I'm certainly not a pathwork expert, but I was somewhat surprised to find this lecture in the portfolio of lectures. I'm not sure why, but in terms of the chakras, I cannot name them. And I somehow each one I think represents a different color and so on. But the thought of energy and its blockage is very important, much more so than I ever realized in my own life. And I relate it to trauma. It's in, I believe, I've recently been doing a lot of work in the area of trauma because I realized that early on in my life, I've been traumatized very severely when I was 5 years old. And that actually was subdued, and I never realized it until about 8 months ago, that it suddenly surfaced. And I didn't quite understand what was going on. So it surfaced in physical manifestations as well as emotional. Heart palpitations, sweating, thinking I had a heart attack, where I actually drove myself to the emergency room on a number of occasions in Florida, actually. And didn't really understand what was going on. And then I was told, no, your heart's fine. Panic attacks, and I decided to leave Florida for a while and go back to New York. I was with my partner down there, and it came up around the house that she's selling. She has 2 homes, and the one we're in, she's selling, and we would move to the other one. And I couldn't understand it. And when I got to New York, what finally happened was initially, I found that I was frightened to leave my apartment, which is pretty frightening. I think it's called agoraphobia. I'm not quite sure. But it's a frightening experience when suddenly you don't want to leave your apartment. And fortunately, as I'm sure Tracy would know, there's D'Agostino on the corner. And I could go down and have him send stuff up. I think that only amplified my desire to stay within my 4 walls. And I realized that I didn't understand what was going on. And I actually then looked up trauma therapists. And I had one which I didn't particularly like, and I found another. And we discussed it. And it really went back to when I was 5 in a particular traumatic incident in which I was locked in a room because I was, quote, I was 5, a bad child and crying for my mother. And when you're traumatized like that, you can do a number of things. There's the fight, flight, or just give up and play dead. So you're not eaten in the animal world. And what happened was I just allowed that to be in my body and hid it for many, many years. And then suddenly it surfaced. And when it surfaced, it was explosive. And the point I'm getting to with the chakras, how important it is to have energy flowing throughout the body. And when that's blocked, there are various manifestations that could be quite serious. And I think it could be certainly physical, emotional, and so on. And it's very frightening and difficult. And one of the important things I realize now is that, I mean, my whole life has been mental, intellectual, go to school, get good grades, make money, travel, know the world. And I accomplished all that, and then still wondering, why do I feel so alone and so lost, so nomadic in the world? Well, because I gave up at a very early age, like 5, that I didn't want to be with anybody, that I would just be my own successful self. And therein lies the problem. We're social beings. And the energy, in essence, going back to chakras, was blocked, which suddenly came up when it had to come up. And so what I'm getting at is the importance, and now the not only the intellectual, psychological component, but body work is extremely important. And some of that, and there are many, many modes of body work to open up the chakras and get the energy flowing. And I realize how important that is. And it is true, one has to keep maintaining the body in that way because the body tends to close up. And that's part of our culture and the way I was brought up. So I get massages. I do craniosacral work, which is a form of energy, Tai Chi, Qigong, and so on. And it really has changed my life to open up to people and more importantly to myself. So I was attracted to this particular lecture. Hopefully that was not too long-winded, but anyway, that's my experience. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. Everything you said was really wonderful, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marion, do you want to say something?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
What I intend to do is share, because there's so much in this and everybody's contribution has been really rich. So I think I was thinking of, well, what can I contribute? And I think from what helps me a lot, because I call it and that was, as we studied the chakras in my training, we also.
Oh, Marion.
You muted by mistake.
There we go. Go ahead.
Oh, it clicked off. And even though we studied all about the chakras, and we've got the main ones, but then we have chakras all over our bodies. We've got the palms of our hands, bottoms of our feet. There's little ones all over the body, because that's how we bring in energy. But those are the main chakras. We've got lots of chakras. And so the other thing that has helped me a lot, because I call it what I go through every day, I'm aligned with my human and divine self in coordination, and then I fall off. and I call it falling off the wagon. And I'm grateful I have so many tools to get back on. So it doesn't take me so long as many years ago to get back on. So I have my meditation, I have my tapping, I have my breathing, different things to get back on. So, but that's what I notice throughout the day, because it can happen so fast that I'm totally identified with just being a little human being. And I call that total suffering. So when I'm really suffering a lot, I'm thinking like, oh, I'm so trying to deal with everything as this little limited human being. And so then what's been helping me, and as I say, I'm not telling others to do this, what helped me a lot, what's been helping me is I separate out the two, my human self and my divine self, and we have a dialogue then. And my divine self is always has my arms up, I'm expanding as the universe is expanding. It's like this. And then mostly my human Marion is going like this and saying, no way, I'm not going expanding with you. I'm staying where I am. I'm going to stay in the pain because it's familiar. And you can't make me do that. And so then my higher self, what I found is that word empathy is so important. Is I can put my arms around my human Marion and I can listen to her and see what her fear is and what would be a little step of something that would be pleasurable that Marion could take with me. So it's kind of I was a theater major in college, and I didn't do it professionally, but that kind of psychodrama acting is part of my nature. So it's not everybody's, but I find that so consoling and helpful. And then also, as I said, we learned in our training to study the Reichian characterological types. So, and there are 8 main ones. And as we learned about them, and my main one was I'm not a masochist, but one of the main ones is a masochism characterological types. So I learned that that I can do all I want with trying to keep my chakras open, but if my posture is out of a line with my ears, with my shoulders, with my hips, with my knees, with my feet, and when I'm walking, when I'm sitting, and they are not aligned, I can do all of everything I'm trying to do to be more conscious, but it's not going to work. The posture has to be aligned with the energy. And so mine being more in that characterological type, I tend to, my neck gets thrust forward, my back hunches over. And I learned that's because I'm trying to protect my heart by making my back armor tight and getting it up there. I'm protecting my heart. So I'm not going to just all of a sudden open my heart because that's too scary, but I can slowly align and put my hand, that chakra, that healing chakra, over my heart and push my chin back. And it feels so unnatural because I want to flip back into my slump. So throughout the day, I'm doing slump and then aligning. So it's kind of nice to be able to do that and have that alignment that I know is so flowing and open and healthy, and know that I'm going to at times get into my slump. And but I'm grateful that I have the knowing of my main characterological type so that I can align with that. And so I learn, working with people, there's the oral type and all these 8 types that Reich brought in. And it's so important, especially anybody working with anybody else. So thank you. I just wanted to share kind of what I go through throughout the day of my falling off the wagon and getting back on. And I thought the more tools in my toolbox to get back on, the better, because then I can pull them out. And I use the kind of metaphor of my toolbox, which is through meditation, through tapping. I do the tapping, I do breathing, all kinds of things to bring down anxiety and so forth, is that I use the metaphor that if I want to build a mansion, but I've only got a hammer and nail, I'm not going to get very far. But if I want to just hang up a little picture on the wall and I'm bringing out my big buzz saw, that's not reality either. So it's like having all these tools in my toolbox, but which ones to pick out for what I need. So I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Marion. That's very, very wise. Yeah. Tracy, put you on the spot. Yeah, Tracy.
Jordan hasn't spoke.
Yeah, Jordan, we need to hear from you too.
Well, the way I pick these lectures is
the same every time, which is to go into a meditative state and wait for a number to appear in my head. And when this one came up, I was surprised because I know nothing about chakras. Never had a yoga class. I've never studied chakras. I know nothing about it. So I was really beginning at ground zero when I read this. I had to read this lecture 7, 8, maybe 10 times before I started to really understand it. So I found that to be an interesting observation, that despite being a very devoted path worker for over a decade at this point, I knew nothing about the chakras, and there are multiple lectures devoted to chakras in the path work. But the first thing that hit me when I read this is that these energy centers, these chakras, how necessary they are for assimilating the energy that's flowing through us, because as Teresa said when she first shared, the energy is so strong in different places that we aren't able to assimilate it. And the first time I knew, sorry, somebody knocked at the door and then set off a nuclear explosion on this end.
Chakras in their lines. It floats.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a dog. That's what they do.
Like,
Tranquila, tranquila.
okay, the explosion is over for the time being. Okay, I shall resume. It's like a phone, the
Don't worry about that.
dog, this trying to get. I noticed that for the first time, this concept, when you were overcome. I think the first time I noticed it was sitting in church, and I was a young girl when this happened, and I was unable to sustain the energy level that was flowing through me, and I noticed that I started to cry. And then over time, I noticed that that's one thing the body does to sort of break the discomfort of a very strong energy coming into you, that your body will start to cry, and it almost brings your vibration down slightly so that it's not so uncomfortable for this very strong positive energy to be surrounded by it. So I was reminded of that when I read this lecture. And I haven't tried to align myself with any kind of body work other than my swimming, which I do as a matter of routine. But I've worked on this from my inside out. And like Marian, your share was resonated with me very much, because at this point, I'm in constant observation of myself. And every day I disconnect and then I reconnect. I disconnect and I reconnect. But what I've noticed over time is that the periods of time where I'm disconnected, and I call it the mothership. So it's your higher self. But I say I'm disconnected, and I say to Joel, I'm disconnected, are less, and the duration of the disconnection is less, so that mathematically translates to that there's more time that I've spent connected up to what I say is the mothership or my higher self. And what I experience on a physical level is an internal vibration that I can actually feel in my hands. I can feel it in my whole body when I'm very aligned with positive energy, I can feel my body tingling. And so I think that's just my individualized experience of the chakras maybe being open, the energy being able to flow through me unobstructed for very short periods of time. I'm not able to sustain long periods yet at all. But as soon as I first experienced it and knew what it was, then at least from that point on, I knew what I was sort of trying to achieve, which was this state where my ego is not absent, but it's very much under, it's not, I'm not ruled by my ego. My ego is very much a servant for me. And that's been a complete change in my entire way of going through life. Every time you talk, Stephen, I'm like, yep, that's me. I mean, from the time I was very small, very focused on the external world and trying to manipulate it and conquer it. And it started in school with trying to get the best grades, and then it progresses from there. But that is just almost like a horse trying to get a carrot. It will never get the carrot because it's strategically placed in and that's what it is for us when we try to find fulfillment in the external world. It's at best very quick fix, and then it's gone. But what I have found is that the more I can be concerned about what's happening inside of me, and I do that by staying in the observer role, the more peace and the bliss the elusive bliss. But for me, it's more just a sense of peace that I've never really had until very recently, because I was always chasing that carrot and it was always moving. I couldn't get any satisfaction from any external achievement. And I've had some, like we all have, but it wasn't giving me any sense of peace. So I think that this whole thing with the chakras is maybe what I experience as just almost a vibration in my body when things are aligned. But I have to really spend a lot more time with the chakras. I'm grateful that Alan passed out this, because I'm going to read that tomorrow. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Well, Jordan, it's up to you now.
So I'm in TP, of course, and a couple weeks ago, I went in the group. I went through the 3-chair, and I worked on a childhood experience of being isolated. And when I was all done with the 3-chair, I felt something that was just different. The area across the back, the upper back of my shoulders became straight. I felt a change in, I don't know how to describe it. There was just a change in this plane across the back here. It's like my shoulders moved backwards a little bit into alignment, which I took to be, a release of a lot of tension that I have been carrying all these years. And, I am a very strong will type, and I spend a lot of time being intellectual, and that is my defense mechanism. And that shifted during the 3-chair process. And so I suspect, I don't know, would that have been an opening of that particular chakra some?
Could you explain the 3-chair? I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, we sit there in the 3-chair. We have the adult self, the child, and the higher self, and we have a conversation between them, and we act out the feelings of the child. We express the feelings of the child, and the adult works on comforting and gets advice from the higher self. So it's an interplay between all three, trying to work on the issue that the child suffered through. The unheard voice of the child from that time period.
Pathwork process.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do the higher self, lower self, and mask also.
Yes.
Person sitting in a chair. It's the
No,
different,
you take the
role
chairs in
for
turn.
yourself.
Yeah.
You it's
And
sort of
you
like
move through the chair.
as you
see in the
use, there are 3
You
chairs,
do.
and depending on the one you sit in,
Yeah.
you adopt that part of your personality.
Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah, we used to do it. We had 3 chairs. Then we'd shift around at each one, take on that characteristics of whichever label was on the chair. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Part of the Pathwork therapy.
Well, maybe you were energizing that chakra, Jordan. It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that we're all groping for the energetic reality of these centers and how to experience them. I mean, the most concrete thing I think was what you said, Teresa, about the yoga classes.
I have another thing to say, but I'm gonna wait for everybody else. I had such an epiphany.
Okay, well,
life-changing
say it now.
epiphany.
We're ready.
Is it finished?
Jordan,
Okay.
did you?
I'm sorry, I'm eating. I had no time for lunch. So as you guys know, me and Juana Raja Yogis, we meditate. And I've been meditating for many years. And due to his presence and his spiritual grounding, which he really is a beautiful, joyful, peaceful presence in my life, because I'm very neurotic, I experience higher and higher states in my meditation. When I put my lotion on my face, a lot of times when I go close my eyes, there's so much light in my third eye that it blows me away. And so I've been experiencing some highs spiritually, but nothing tangible. And then I was in a course, because I constantly do, stuff. I was at your saint, and then I went away to Elmira, New York. I met a living saint, Swami Vishwananda, amazing saint who gave us a darshan. Also blew me through the roof. And that guy literally took me out of my body. So I'm like, okay, I'm growing spiritually, right? And I've been working on it for many years, maybe 16, 17 years. No. Anyway, somewhere in there, in all of this stuff that I researched, I came across a book, and it's called The Finders. And it rings a bell. I always have that intuition, like, this is for you. Just like The Finders. And this is about people who actually found enlightenment in this life. And blew me away. So I have to read this book right away. I ordered it same day, same minute, the book came. I was so fascinated, and I started devouring this book. But unfortunately, this is a very smart guy, a researcher, university professor, who spent about 15 years researching the happiest people in the world, religious, spiritual leaders, but also different people. And they found enlightenment, but they found it as a feeling of radical well-being.
Radical well-being.
Let me actually read the term, because
You know who the author is?
I will tell you everything. I tell you, this thing literally flipped me over. And I wanted to share with this group because I respect everybody here. And I think maybe some people could benefit from it. So this is called Fundamental Well-Being.
Jeffrey Martin?
Yes. And I tell you, I read that book. I was so hungry for this book. Disappointed at the point because it was from the point of view of the finders. What happens when you actually find it? What are the shifts? How do you behave? What basically becomes of your life? And it reminded me a lot about Pathwork.
because he talks about the narrative self, which I believe Pathwork talks about when we constantly criticize ourselves and all of these blockages. That's the narrative self that most of us have all our lives. And a lot of it fascinating me. And I was devouring this book, and I said to myself, okay, this is really from the finder's viewpoint. I'm the seeker. I want to see what's out there for the seeker. So I went to work, and sometimes I'm not so busy at work. And I literally found a video of an interview with him and another woman on YouTube. And I sent it to myself to home. And that evening, Juan left, that was Sunday night. I said to watch a little bit of it. And I crossed over, I transferred. I literally never felt like this before. So he says the first sign is you lose the little voice in your head, you lose the narrative self. I transferred and I didn't know what the hell happened. Like literally, that's what he says. These people don't know. I transferred to a state of such well-being, which I've never experienced in my life. The narrative self completely dropped. There was no voice in my head. And I was happy.
When did this happen?
Just this Sunday.
When you were reading this?
No, I was watching his video. I was watching his interview. I can send it to you.
Sounds like it.
I was watching an interview. You know what? I look into his eyes and he transferred me from the energy he was speaking with. There's like this incredible thing in his eyes. And I literally went out of my body and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I actually experienced what he was describing. And it lasted the entire day and the night. And it was incredible. And I thought, he says that once you cross over, you don't come back. But he says certain states, like a parent dies or something drastic happens, you lose your job, will bring you back temporarily. So here's what happened. I crossed over. I was pinching myself. I literally, because usually Juan, is there for the day, he leaves for the night, and I feel lonely and I feel anxious and I have to go to work and blah. I didn't have any of that. I was so happy in my life. There was no voice in my head. Everything made perfect sense. That's exactly what he says. The narrative self falls off. Exactly. And I tell you, it just happened like this, Tracy. Looking into his eyes, listening, I just flipped. Like literally, I flipped.
How long did it last?
And I tell you what killed it, and I still have it to a degree, but I tell you what happened. So two things happened. I went to my OBGYN. She thought she felt something on my breast. She sent me to a surgeon who sent me to MRI, mammogram, I am a cancer survivor in 2007, 16 years of health on my right breast. And that freaked me out, right? So even though I had that coming, I still was in a sense of well-being for like 24 hours. I cannot describe it. And it felt like I'm enlightened or something. Like when I'm talking about it, I still feel it. There is such a sense of well-being and connection. You want to love and hug everybody and just like literally you happy. You're completely happy. You have such a profound sense of well-being, which never happened to me in this life because I'm like you, coming from trauma, dysfunction. So that flipped me over completely. I highly recommend this guy, this course that he has, which 70% of people flip to be the finder for the seeker. So I still was flipping back and forth between that complete well-being and feeling of connection and loving everybody and fear. And then the fear came in first for the exams. Then I went to work. This guy never shows up on Wednesday. He came in Wednesday to observe what I'm doing. He flipped me over again. I had this well-being going to work. He flipped me. And then I was regaining my well-being, and this radiology place texted me this morning, there's something on my left breast they need to look at, and they want me back for the mammogram, diagnostic mammogram. I'm going Friday. That put me in such a panic and fear that now, forget the well-being. When I'm talking about it, I still feel it. So those states can coexist. All my life, I never felt good. Never. This state was indescribable. It was like the unity state, I think. And this guy brought it on just by looking in his eyes and listening to his voice, describing what the finder is. He's got a beautiful course. He's got a book. Please find this guy. I can send you some info because I think Pathwork and this is connected. as you get through the negativity and but I've experienced this. It's there. It wasn't orgasmic or like he says, pleasure supreme, but it was such a state of flow and peace and well-being. My whole body, my soul, everything was just happy and well. Everything was well and everything was just perfect. And he describes different states, but literally even looking at people, I felt like loving them and hugging them and everything, I mean,
You were connected up to the mothership.
to the mothership, but to the degree that I never experienced in my life, even when I was in love or sexual ecstasy, I was never that well. So this state occurred to me just this week.
Wow.
And now from there, I flipped to such a fear and panic that literally when I came here, I had like what Stephen was describing. Should I check myself in an emergency room? Because I couldn't even eat. That's why I'm nubbing on your food. I couldn't eat. I was just in such a fear and panic because the exam is on Friday. I'm shitless scared. I went through cancer 16 years ago and it was one of the worst experiences of my life. And then, so I just wanted to tell you that it exists. And I don't even think you have to have all these chakras aligned because I'm certainly not perfect. But it came about, it just took me over. It like somebody flips a switch in your head. That's how he describes it. That's how it happened. And everything was just perfect.
And when you even listen to his interview on YouTube, he can flip you back to that state.
That's how Eckhart Tolle affects
So
me.
Eckhart Tolle, I have that too, but then he also mentions one of his teachers or gurus is Krishna Swami or something.
Yeah.
So there's a famous picture of him, and he says he's in such a state of presence. And they took that picture, that if you look at the picture, you can go, you become present, which is what that state is.
Yeah, because you know what? If you
And I've
put it
done
in
that.
there,
I have
you
that
can wake
picture.
it up.
And if I'm feeling like, gosh, I wish I was,
You look at it and it,
brings you there. It can bring you there.
oh wow.
Yeah.
Can you send me the picture?
Sure.
And
It's
you
on
know,
Can I just add something?
Of course. Yeah,
When,
Barbara. Yeah, hold
you know,
on. Barbara.
excuse me, hearing this discussion about, flipping and being in another state, it sort of reminds me of other activities and things that have maybe part of like the energy body. For instance, when I'm doing art and I'm in flow or dancing or laughing, or perhaps the most startling to me was once working with Adrian Winogrand energetically. I was going to be going skiing that weekend and I had a lot of fear about it. And she had me just ground myself in my body and sort of like go through some of the motions of flow. I don't remember exactly, how, but it was just being able to sort of like feel in the body and the energy of like being connected to the energy. So it's like, laughing, skiing, dancing, some of these things that I think of, like maybe gathering energy or being in tune with energy. And I hadn't really thought about it until, Teresa was talking about flipping or, talking about these other states. So I just wanted to add that thought.
It's not like you're joyful because you're skiing or you had fun or even making love or anything. This is such a profound experience. Maybe this is what Eckhart Tolle, because he says a lot of people who are depressed or suicidal experience it. This you cannot mistake for anything else. This is so profound. It happens at the deepest core of your being. And it's nothing like you've ever experienced. This is not joy, fun, or anything. This is a life-changing experience of really become a finder. This is like, I believe, a beginning of enlightenment or something where you completely lose the old self. You have no connection to it. You have no need for it. There's nothing about you that's the same. Like literally you flip, but the flip is not, oh, I'm joyful now and I'm happy or no, it's not even me. I don't know who I am anymore. What is this?
Can I ask a question?
This is like that.
Yeah, sure. Ellen, you had a question?
Well, I actually, well, I have, well, okay. I first, I kind of wanted to talk because no one, you kind of left me out. I do have a question. I have a comment slash question about, it's kind of mixed in with stuff I wanted to say, but I didn't speak before, right? I mean, I spoke a minute or two, but
That's right.
I guess I just wanted to express that I felt a little upset that I was like you said, everybody spoke and it wasn't seen. Um, so guess I'm a little sensitive. But I know it's getting a little late, and I know it's almost 10 after 8. But
Go ahead.
because I was thinking about the connection. Well, I've been experiencing a lot of blood. I like the conception of the first center kind of. I think she's kind of saying it's almost like encompasses what we would think of as the first and second chakra. The second chakra, like in the classic system, it's the pleasure center is really the second chakra. But so I keep having this conversation with various healers about, because I'm having so much issues with my elimination of my bowels. So that would correspond with the first energy center.
Talking about the root chakra, right?
Right. So it's the root. That's the root, but very much. So one of the things I've explored a lot is how the different chakras are connected. So the thing that's really fascinating for me is that my elimination issues were catalyzed by my thyroid. It started with having a severely hyperthyroid. But my, sorry for TMI, but my main symptom was constipation. So my throat was overactive and my first center was shutting down. So this is something that has really, really bewildered me. So what's interesting to me about what Teresa is sharing about her experience with now I think you would call that a samadhi. I think that's what samadhi is defined at. What Teresa is describing is a samadhi state where you're, in a state of, enlightenment, like where you're. And so I keep listening to this woman on YouTube who keeps talking about that we should not seek to have these state. Now it's really torn. It's like a little tearing of the thing, because obviously like what she's talking about is like very powerful. And I've kind of had, I had a long period of time where I was feeling very, very close to it wasn't, I never lost, well, I don't know if I've always been aware of an inner voice or the narrative self. I've always been a little bit confused by that, but I guess it was touching to me because this person that I've been listening to has been describing how if we come out of the body will assert itself with crisis, either with pain or with, some very difficult thing. So it's interesting that Teresa's talking about, the fear, the resurgence of the fear. Because it's like the body is asserting its reality.
I think as soon as she had it, then she got the breast cancer.
Say what were you saying? What was
interesting observation that you're making? Because as soon as Teresa experienced this samadhi on Sunday night, then the next day she had
right. It was so quick. So that's why I wanted to share it, because I was like, wow, because it was very resonating with me what this person was saying, that because that's where I had these 3 years where I felt like my life was just coming together. And then I went through the most horrific trauma I'd ever experienced in my life, which is still riding out. It's 10 years. It's been riding out. Things have been improved. They have been improving lately. And it's interesting to me how this conversation was like, I was feeling very distressed, or I feel better now, but I was feeling very distressed early on. But I also noticed that my thoughts were, I didn't, I think that my thoughts, I'm sorry, everybody's calling me now for my birthday. As soon as I've been involved in stuff, it's like people are calling me. Sorry, I just want to get my train of thought back. Oh goodness. Oh, that I was going into a state of overthinking. So what I did actually was I went to working with what I learned from acupuncture, which is working on a spleen meridian. Okay. Which is associated with overthinking. Your spleen meridian gets out of balance. This is what 2 different acupuncturists said. You have to stop thinking so much. But it also, but the spleen also would connect with the solar plexus energy center. So I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I guess I wanted to make the connection between what she's saying the solar plexus deals with. Does anybody have the lecture nearby?
The solar
I had it up and I lost it.
That's a spiritual connection. It's
That's the wisdom center.
The wisdoms, yeah. So it's kind of the beginning. It's like the beginning of the spiritual connection.
yes, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Because, and again, in classic, I think chakra theory, the lower would be, the lower parts of life, the emotional, like the more of the emotional stuff, and then it kind of moves up into the spiritual. So it sounds like it's not too far from what
Moira says, the solar plexus center opens the way to connection and unification with spiritual wisdom and universal truths and the impersonal love feelings connected to this experience.
And so because I would say, like, at the lower, now again, I mean, it sounds pretty similar, when you're talking about sexuality and the pleasure and giving and receiving, those are very much earthly, the things that are most important to us in the physical plane. And then at the center, it starts to move up into the higher functions or into the more spiritual functions. So, I guess it's making sense to me, just in terms of the struggle that I'm having with coming to terms with this very dense experience I'm having in my body. And I also do feel like there's a deeper awakening that's happening, or, a melding of the 2 things, which I feel like the pathwork is very much about. Right, it's this ground. It's like really grounding. It's like these very high spiritual concepts, but we're grounding them in this psychological and relational and physical reality. I mean, that's why I stay with this work, because I feel like it is asking us to do that.
Yeah, it's also true that our ideas about how we're making progress are not always correct. The ego is evaluating the progress we're making, but the ego is not in a position to really evaluate that. So the difficulty is, sometimes I think that the harder things are, is a sort of an indication of the fact that we're really doing the work we have to do. It's kind of right?
Yes, and you know what Juan said, I wanted to just mention again what Juan said about surrender to the end. That is exactly what, again, this person I just referenced, this woman who's considered, she's a young guru. That's what I keep hearing over and over again, surrendering to the inner, to the love within, to the guru within, and turning away from the ego, or recognizing that the ego and consciously turning away from it. And she also references the idea, like people will talk about the dark night of the soul. She was saying that it's really the dark night of the ego. So when this is building off of what you're saying, Alan, that, when things are really difficult, it's like the ego is, we're really working on, trying to discern and release or you know, maybe you can't release ego, but you gently let it go and then go towards the light, move towards the light, move towards the
I
light.
think that this narrative, that the narrative voice that you're talking about, Teresa, it's what the guy I think calls the little ego. The little ego.
No, but that's
You
the
know,
voice that constantly, like witnesses your life, and I actually don't have it anymore. I
well,
don't
I
have
mean, I think there's two things. There's the little ego, and then there's the what Marion would call the observer
It's the
self.
bars behind
like
yourself.
he calls it
Right.
narrative self. So let's say, if I had it,
Yeah,
if
it's
I really
constantly
lost it,
chattering, right?
if he's saying right now, what are you, a fool? He's gonna put it on YouTube. What are you talking about? Your
Well, that's like the little ego
I
more
lost
than.
it, guys. I really don't have it.
That's the immature child.
And Teresa, you still feel that it's not, you're having that experience still, that voice is not there?
Still having that experience,
Yeah,
Ellen is saying?
it's not there, and when it comes back, it's a
Okay.
my old self used to do this all the time when I had this narrative self.
Yeah.
Amen.
And it would be narrative a part of my life.
Talking all the
But
time.
I think because I'm going higher and I'm experiencing it, I am bringing to the surface, like in Pathwork, with all of my fears. And the shit hit the fan so strong, like Stephen was saying. I wanted to drive myself to ER today. Maybe I'm subconsciously saying, okay, so I'm afraid of being enlightened, just like what he says in his lecture. We are afraid of these good states. I loved it. I cannot express to you what a beautiful way it is to live. I've been on this earth for almost 64 years in few days. I have never experienced that. And it was the best thing. Please don't joke. This is very serious.
Teresa, can you come closer to because it's hard to hear you. It's just so hard to hear you. I really want to hear what you're saying.
No, this is no fun, Juan. Like,
This is beautiful.
I'm trying to say, I'm sorry, I just won't laugh because this is too serious. This is like the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced in my life. I mean, better than good sex, better than anything. This is such a feeling of well-being, but what happens is the voice in my head completely shut up, just dropped. And he says it in that book, that's the first thing that happens. You lose the narrative self. So I don't know how Pathwork refers to it, but what I'm thinking from this lecture is this. He says, we are afraid of positive states. We are afraid of pleasure supreme. We are afraid of being enlightened. We are afraid of having it too good because we are brought up in this Catholic, you have to suffer, you have to sacrifice, you have to do for others, you have to do this, you have to do that. When you experience such a feeling of well-being, maybe deep down in there, because I don't do it consciously, something is telling me, well, it's too good. Who are you to have that? Like, how did you deserve it? Yeah, I meditate for 16 years, but it's such a profound state that I think maybe myself subconsciously, I went to the other extreme and I said, okay, well, you're going to be so happy. So let's see what is this shit hidden down there. And I have a lot of anger and fear. So now I probably created the situation with the breast, which is so funny because actually she felt something on the right breast. Now they're telling me it's on the left. Maybe synchronicity, who knows? And I created that situation with the boss at work, who is a jerk, but I didn't have to give it to him, So I think subconsciously I'm saying, okay, I'm having it too good.
Let's get back to earth.
Digging the dirt, because literally it's so good. How long can I handle that good?
Can't tolerate.
Well, the guide says,
Yeah.
it's a spiral process, right? That we keep on going around and around in the spiral, but we go to a higher point every time.
Like,
Yeah.
stay in
Right.
that.
No, I've had it.
Don't stop.
Anyway,
We're gonna get to that.
so listen, my friends, shall we have our meditation?
I'd just like to add one thing
Go ahead,
rather
Steve.
quickly. Tracy alluded to trembling or within. That was very interesting, actually, because as I progressed in my work with trauma, I started to experience internally, one cannot see it, an internal trembling, but not only in one part of my body, throughout my entire body. And at first it was disconcerting. So I made the mistake of Googling it. And I came up with all kinds of very deep, horrendous illnesses. And it's not that. And then I read something very interesting by Eckhart Tolle, who spoke exactly about this internal trembling. And he says, getting in touch with the life force energy that is always within us. And when you start to clear away some of the debris and get the energy moving, one will discern, experience that trembling. And that in itself is an extremely, extremely healthy experience, mentally and physically. So I'm glad Tracy brought that up because it's something that I experienced too. And rather than be disconcerting, it's actually now rather comforting. So that's it. And the other thing is, are we discussing a book? It sounds like a very interesting book. What's the name of it? By Jeffrey Martin.
The Finders.
The
Finders.
Finders. But the Finders book is probably not the place to start. I mean, you might because you're very intellectual, Stephen. The Finders, it's about the people who actually found enlightenment at different stages.
Finder, Finder.
The
Finders.
But
Finders.
that book can lead you to other work and
Okay,
how to become a finder.
thank you.
Somebody, Jeffrey Martin.
Jeffrey Martin.
Jeffrey Martin. So I just downloaded the free sample on my Kindle as we were sitting here. You can just do that. Then you can read the free
And if you
sample.
guys want to go on YouTube and Google and just look in his eyes and read his energy, this guy is definitely.
You're gonna send me that picture.
I think we should just sit erect and meditate on the different chakras, whatever chakras we want to meditate on. And try to feel them, feel each of these chakras and where we relate to each one. All right, so 15 minutes.
You want me to set it or are you gonna set it?
I'll set it. I'll set it.